Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Matt Freeman.
The body was far smaller than the heart it had contained.
Jesus Christ, man, pull it together. We got a podcast to do. Oy vey.
Oi! Oi!
I feel so bad laughing about this because I'm very sad too, but that was very good. That was very good. This week on the show, we begin the final part of the Dark Tower, Part 5, The Scarlet Field of Can Ka No Re. We're discussing chapters 1 and 2 of this section. And in this week's reading, Roland says goodbye to the last two members of his old quartet. But for a nice change of pace, only one of them dies tragically. Thanks, Stephen. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
What a relief. Yes, like you said, it was sad. It was very sad. Mm-hmm. I think bittersweet is the emotion that was predominant throughout most of it. I mean, the sadness hits you in specific poignant beats here and there. But mostly I was not sad. Mostly it was more like a wistful looking back over our journey and also a degree of sort of excitement about what's to come, because I know that we only really have one more week of reading left.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I think especially in the Susannah chapter, there is this real feeling of joy at the fact that she's getting out, that she's getting to go home, or not home, but she's getting to leave, and she's getting to leave with her life, which is something that no one else in her group has ever gotten to do. And so that makes you happy. And yeah, I mean, it's a sadness because you love this character and you're sad to see her go, but like you're excited for her. You're excited for this choice that she made here at the end.
Yeah.
That she didn't have to make. That's
a good point. I mean, we're going to get there, but she goes off through this door, and I'm pretty sure we're not going to see her again. And it's like, well, now she's going to go have her own further adventures and her own life. And who knows what that's going to look like. And that gives you some sense of not, and they lived happily ever after quite, but, and then she went off into the sunset, more like.
Of course, the flip side of that is the chapter that follows it. Chapter 2, Mordred, in which Roland is just a mess, just a total mess. Like, he's depressed, he's grief-ridden, he's tired, and he's just ready for it to be over. Like, I mean, he's excited to reach the tower, sure, but it's almost of like, I just want this to be done with now. Mm-hmm. And I love how King really captures that feeling even before he loses Oy, which is just really just kind of the last straw almost. And it's just a powerful pair of chapters. It really is. We're heading headlong into our climax, but just this is it. Like, our last two characters are undrawn here, and all that's left is Patrick Danville.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a lot to say about kind of Roland's behavior in these chapters, because it is definitely really unusual.
Yeah, cool. Well, I can't wait to talk about that with you, which we'll get to do here in just a couple minutes. Okay. Before we move on to this week's reading, though, I just want to do a quick announcement. The first thing is, if you are following us on our subreddit, you will notice we've been putting some more stuff there lately. I think Matt and I have collectively decided that we're going to get better at social media. It's like my begins in February New Year's resolution is to get better at social media, to do more stuff on social media. Part of that is bumping up our Reddit. We put our calendar schedule on there. We're putting threads for other shows. We talk about our other shows on here occasionally, but we've got a whole suite of shows, and we recommend you subscribe to our subreddit, where you can learn about all of our shows, all of our live events, all those cool things.
And at the very least, you can go check out my image that I made myself using my Photoshop skills of the teddy bear Roland approaching the dark lollipop, which
your abomination,
which we talked about last week, and you should have known was coming, honestly, Scott.
Just enough time passed before you decided to actually pull the trigger on making this thing that I had just forgot that conversation happened, and then And then I had to see this today.
And then I gotcha.
Here's what Matt does. He sends me images and then says, "Any feedback before I post this?" and then by the time I say my feedback, which was why?
What? What's this?
He's already posted it.
Yeah, I think you actually were just like, what the fuck is this? Like, I don't even remember what this is referencing to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that is available right now on our subreddit. Hooray. The other announcement we had is this Saturday at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, Ruben and Elliot, two members of our Doof partner community, are doing their monthly game club live stream. So we had a book club last week, and this week we're having a game club. That's when they just get together for a couple hours with all of our listeners and just chat about a video game. Our patrons will pick a game every month, and then they'll play it, and then they'll all chat about it together. So this Saturday, they're talking about the video game Celeste. It is the 2D platformer, one of the most challenging and most wonderful games I've played in recent memories. It's a very good game, Celeste. So if you played that game before and you want to just listen to a couple guys chat about it for a few hours and to participate in that chat, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and head on over there on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's always fun.
It is. That's all I had for announcements this week. Let's move right into the chapters.
All right.
We begin the first chapter of the final part, chapter 1, titled The Sore and the Door, subtitled Goodbye, My Dear. Oh gosh, here we go. Yeah. So we begin this chapter with King immediately making clear what's going to happen this week. We're going to be saying goodbye to Susannah Dean. And King does this thing where he kind of starts in the future and then rewinds time a little bit. He's done this time and time again throughout the series, and he's doing it again here, where we kind of start the chapter with this overview paragraph and then move backwards a little bit. And in this overview paragraph, it says, Susannah Dean begins to suffer frequent bouts of weeping. She would feel these impending cloudbursts and would excuse herself from the others, saying she had to go into the bushes and do her necessary. And there she would sit on a fallen tree, or perhaps just the cold ground, put her hands over her face, and let her tears flow. If Roland knew this was happening, and surely he must have noted her red eyes when she returned to the road, he made no comment. She supposed he knew what she did. Her time in Midworld and Endworld was almost at an end. And I really love this setup here. We know Susannah Dean is leaving. It's something you've suspected for the last couple of weeks now. Like, King has kind of slowly and inexorably moved us towards this point that Susannah will be leaving the book, but we don't know how yet, and neither do our characters. We don't know, will it be death, or will Ka loosen its grip on Susannah for just long enough for her to get away? It ends up being the latter. It ends up being Susan choosing to walk through a door and be undrawn. But the emotion of the early parts of this chapter are filled with the not knowing of it all.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because I think I was, in a similar place to, well, I mean, we talked about this last week, so that's kind of where I was. I was in the place of, I think she's probably going to die, and I'm kind of trying to steel myself for that. But also, I see a lot of, narrative push toward the idea that maybe, she can outrun Ka. Maybe there's some other way out for her. And, there are forces that are telling her to turn back, and, maybe she'll listen to those forces. And so I was, I think this is actually really smart of King, because, surprise is pretty important to storytelling. Like, this is actually kind of the whole notion of how you do setups and payoffs, is you're always trying to surprise the reader.
Sure.
You're not trying to surprise them in a way where suddenly a dinosaur in a purple costume comes in through the door, like in the middle, like not just random surprise, but surprise that you.
How the fuck did you predict the end of this book?
Yeah, well, the Lord of the Rings yet again. But like, the point is, when you set up a pattern of killing off your beloved characters, then the reader begins to expect that. Thus, it's not surprising. Thus, it's not dramatic. And so he has to re-inject a sense of uncertainty there. And, and then ultimately, I think it's for the best that Susannah doesn't die in terms of plotting. And also just because I love this character, and I'm glad that she at least gets to continue on into the story.
Yeah, definitely. King then moves us kind of backwards in time a little, where we see the group get to Federal Outpost 19. first. And I love this little bit here because we learn at this outpost that we go into this room and see all these screens, all these TV screens on a wall. Some of them used to show images of the Dark Tower, but recently they've gone out, as if the Crimson King said, no, I don't want you to see the tower anymore. But some of them, we learn here, Matt, were from satellites, satellite imagery from orbits around the Earth from a long, long time ago. And I don't know, this struck me a lot this time of kind of the absurdity and hilariousness of that image of just imagining Midworld being a place in which it's a sphere and a satellite's orbiting around it.
Totally. I mean, I feel like King is saving this reveal to the end just like to laugh at us, because I remember asking so long ago, like at the beginning, man, I don't even remember, it might have even been in the Gunslinger potentially, being like, so wait, is this world even a sphere, or is this just like a flat disk that keeps growing or something ridiculous? Because apparently there are satellites, which at least to me implies that it's probably a sphere. I don't know how else you would have satellites.
Yeah, I think it being spherical is kind of necessity for the whole constant falling that is orbit.
Yes. We're going to get another beat in a little bit that has to do with the stars, which I'm going to have more to say about then. But yeah, I feel like this is all kind of getting us to think about these sort of more cosmic issues of the age of this world and its place in the universe and these kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just when you have Midworld described to you, where there is this clear nexus of everything being the tower, and then these beams that run along the surface of the planet, I guess, all ending in certain points, you just don't imagine it being round. You just really don't. And perhaps the argument here is that, well, once upon a time it was, and that stopped along with the softness of time, the softness of space, this what was just a round planet, just orbiting around a star, became something else.
Yeah, right. Maybe so. That's interesting, because it kind of implies that if it is a sphere, then all of the beams actually would have to cross at the antipode of the Dark Tower.
Yeah,
which is kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, where would that be?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That's yeah, I don't know. Let's table that until we get to talking about the stars later on.
Sure. Bill tells them that they're only 120 wheels, about 100 miles from the tower, and he has a nice vehicle he can give them that will take them all the way directly to the tower, the last leg of the journey. They could be there as early as tomorrow. But Roland says no. Only that part of me thinks that tomorrow day is too soon. That part of me thinks we should go the rest of the way on foot, just as we've already traveled so far. He took a deep breath, let it out. I'm not ready to be there yet. Not quite ready. You too, Susannah marveled. You too. I need more time to prepare my mind and my heart, mayhap even my soul. He reached into his back pocket and brought out the photocopy of the Robert Browning poem that had been left for them in Dandelo's medicine chest. There's something written here about remembering the old times before coming to the last battle, or the last stand. It's well said, and perhaps really all I need is what the poet speaks of, a draught of earlier, happier sights. I don't know, but unless Susannah objects, I believe we'll go on foot. I love this choice here, Matt, and I want to know what you think about it here.
Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts about this, actually. So part of me wants to object, I guess, that like Roland would never delay another second if he knew he was this close to the tower. Mm-hmm. But I admit that's a very small part of me. I think the rest of me is noticing, Roland's soul, as he says, is currently very bruised and battered. Mm-hmm. He's lost the ones who are most important to him yet again. He's about to lose another. And it feels like if he were to reach the tower in this state, then it would be kind of the hollowest victory imaginable, both for him and I think also for us. So I think he's definitely feeling a kind of need to get his head right before he gets there, because it's almost like if he gets the tower in this sorry state, then like what was even the point? I mean, and the sad thing about all that is he's not in a much better mood at the end of this week's reading, so it's not like all of this time really bought him anything, seemingly.
I mean, in fact, you could argue that what had bought him was the death of Oy,
right?
Because if they had just hopped in that cart and rode on, Mordred would not have been able to keep up and probably would have died since he had food poisoning.
Yes, that's true. I don't want to come down too hard on that, because it could also be like, well, then Susannah would make it to the tower, which means she'd probably get killed.
Which would yeah, I mean, textually be her doom. That's what she feels very clear about. So yeah, you're right. These are trade-offs, and I mean, it is the ka of the story working its way in order to make sure that these two things happen. I agree with you. I also think like Roland and Stephen and us don't want this story to end yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big part of what's happening here. Like, I do think there's a lot in these last few chapters of this book that are just Stephen King buying time. I mean, we kind of joked last week about having a whole chapter in which they very, in a lot of detail, discuss the process of making hide coats to protect from the warmth. And we didn't talk about it then because I was kind of saving it, but that strikes me as an author who just isn't ready to move on with the story yet, and is just kind of killing time. And not to pad the length of his book. This book's playing long already, but just because he doesn't want to be there at the end. He doesn't want it to be over. Like, part of him, this has been the story that has been so important, and he's excited to get to the end, but also once it's over, what else is there?
Yeah.
To be on brand for the show and talk about Lord of the Rings really quickly, I think in my heyday of watching every minute of the special features of that series of movies, I remember that the final shot of the final day for all the trilogy, they just didn't want to finish, and Peter Jackson just kept having them do the scene over and over again, take after take after take, and they probably got it on like take 4, but they weren't. Once he calls it, that's a wrap. It's over, and he just wasn't ready for it yet. And I feel like that's a lot of what the mood around this choice is. We're just not quite ready for it to be over yet. Yeah.
I like that. I like that very much. I'm going to say something that might sound like it's in contradiction to that, but I think it's sort of just a similar idea, approaching it from a different angle, which is that I write a lot of stories, and I've found that a common mistake that I make, and I think it maybe even a common mistake that I see in storytelling, is like, you kind of move directly from the climactic action to the end, something like that. You move from like, okay, we've resolved the plot elements, and now it's time for us to end this story, and then you just end it, and that can feel extremely abrupt and unearned and all of these things, and you're not, all you need to do to fix a situation like that usually is you sit back and you say, like, how, like, does this feel satisfying? And usually if the answer is no, it's like, okay, well, the characters need a minute to like feel the consequences of everything that's happened to them, and then once they've felt the consequences of what's happened to them, then we can end this thing and it will feel right. And so I think that's, a big part of all of this, really. I mean, everything ever since Jake died really has been Susannah and Roland, and sort of us with them, which is really the important thing, processing these things. And processing can be such a like clinical word. What I mean is coming to terms with it and moving through the process of grief until it's no longer this just fresh wound. We've got our head around it, and we can move on without feeling like, oh, we haven't even really dealt with Jake's death yet. We haven't even dealt with Eddie's death yet, and you're forcing it, and we're already at the tower. That doesn't feel right. We have to deal with these things.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little, I mean, I think both of those things, what you just said and what I just said, they're essentially the same thing, except maybe from a Doyleist versus Watsonian perspective, sort of, if that makes sense.
No, I think one is a lot more clinical as to just the day-to-day struggles of writing, and the other is emotional, but I think they do lead to the same choice, which is you just kind of prolong the climax a little bit. And I'm not saying it like, when I say Stephen King was filling time, I'm not saying these chapters are a waste. I think it's all important. I think you're absolutely right. We need the time to let our characters sit with the consequences of what has happened, especially Roland, who is just like like beside himself. Like
Yeah.
he's just, it's all happening again. And he knew it was coming. It's one thing to sit at the beginning of your quest and think to yourself, I'm going to fucking get these people killed again. It's one thing to think that. It's another to be in it again and be like, yep, I was right. I was right the whole time. And here I've opened my heart up again. I've fallen in love with all these people. And what has it got me? More pain, more suffering, more death. And I'm just fucking sick of it all.
Yeah. I mean, back, early in the story, drawing of the 3 era, I was thinking like, well, this time it's going to be different. Like we've set this character up as this guy who always loses the ones he loves.
Mm-hmm.
But this time it's going to be different because this quartet is going to be different. These are going to be the ultimate badasses, and they're going to, I can't imagine Eddie Dean dying. I can't imagine that. He's too awesome. He's too great. He's too lovable. And
Oops.
Yeah, well, but that's it. Yeah. So like, that's the thing is I guess, yeah, Roland's feeling, kind of like we're feeling, except more so because he's, the character.
I do like that because I think there's so much metafiction going on in the story. And this idea that like Roland probably felt the same way you did, which is that, okay, yeah, like all your friends before now died, but now we're in the book part of the book.
Uh-huh.
And so now it's going to change. Now it's going to be different. Now you're going to succeed where you failed in the past. And yeah, we're kind of seeing that, no, that's not how it works, bud. Like, that's not what Ka has in store for you.
Yeah, right.
So I want to once again point out before we move on here that the story stays more or less firmly in Susannah's point of view right up until she walks through the door at the end of the chapter. So we kind of, throughout these early moments in this chapter, just have to wonder about what Roland is thinking and feeling. And of course, we have Susannah with her sight, her ability to see, her observation of people. So we get pretty good guesses at what Roland is thinking, but we're still kind of held at a distance from him. And I really love this quote here. Roland gave her a grateful, if distracted, smile. He seemed to have gone away from her somehow during these last few days. And I pointed this out just because this is so similar to kind of the detachment that Roland underwent as he climbed under the mountain with Jake.
Yeah.
He knows Susannah is about to leave one way or the other, and he's mentally and emotionally preparing himself for that fact by pulling away from her a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's different. It's different from the way it was with Jake, right? It's not the same. It's not like he's saying, okay, I'm going to call her the woman instead of Susannah, like he did with Jake, where he started calling him the boy. But it's still similar.
I think there's a lot of parallels with respect to how he treated Jake up until the end. And a lot of these parallels are, like you just said, there to be different rather than, a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he is beginning his uncoupling from her, but as he goes through this, it's going to sort of be the opposite of what he did with Jake in many regards.
Yeah, with Jake, he turned away. With Susannah, he drops to his knees and begs.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's such a powerful moment. Yeah,
exactly.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
So they decide to head on foot, 5 days and 4 nights till they get to the tower. Except once again, we have Susannah thinking, he's not meant to go either. This is talking about Patrick. Not him, not Oy, not me. But what is to become of us then? She didn't know, but she was queerly unworried about it. Ka would tell. Ka and her dreams. I love this because we've had these multiple moments throughout this book since they've gotten closer and closer to the tower that, like you said, they've outrun Ka, that they've gone beyond Ka at this point. And it's just not true. It's just not true at all.
Yeah, right. And I think Roland knows it, right? Like he's hopeful, but I think he knows the truth.
Yeah. Okay, now we got to talk about some stars, Matt, because we get to this moment as Roland and Susannah look up at the stars one night. They see Old Mother and the Old Star, but they see something else, Matt. They see the Big Dipper. And according to Roland, that constellation used to appear in the skies of his world back in the day, and now it's back again. Another sign of life and renewal, Roland says. And of course, this is, and I think, an intentional callback to it was under the stars that Odetta and Eddie fell in love and made love for the first time way back in Drawing of the Three.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, stars aren't mentioned very often, and so that was one of the few other times that they were mentioned. So I think you're right about that being an intentional.
Which is not to say that Odetta and Roland are falling in love and about to bang. That's not what I mean at all. It's just this moment of connection between characters that was super important in the establishing moments of Odetta, and now is super important in the final moments of her as well.
Yeah, I mean, you could say there's a bonding happening, even though they're not falling in love. Yeah.
Yes.
But I want to talk about the star specifically and connect that back to what we were just saying about the satellites, because I really think this is cool. This is fascinating. Like I really nerded out about this, and I want to get sci-fi for a second, because this is kind of a sci-fi story when you think about it. Mm-hmm. And this, this seems kind of huge in that context. Like it's a minor beat, but it seems like a really optimistic thing, because something fundamental to the nature of Midworld has to have shifted for this to have happened. Things have to have realigned to such an extent that the sky itself has changed. Like that's massive. I mean, maybe the world started out as a sphere. Like when Roland was a kid, it was a sphere, and then it flattened out as the tower did this bizarre thing to space, and now it's the weird bendiness of directions and time and space and all that happened. And maybe the light from that part of the sky was not being, was being bent away or something like that. And now we don't know that everything is back to normal, but this is sort of a hint that, like, on an almost planetary scale, things have to kind of be back to normal. Otherwise, how could you possibly be seeing other stars? Like, it doesn't it, and then if you accept all of this, okay, if you just say, yeah, okay, Matt, that makes sense. Maybe maybe the world, maybe space and direction and everything has kind of unfucked itself. Doesn't that kind of hint that maybe the whole world moving on thing and the whole derangement of space and time might be reversing? And maybe Roland did, in the end, reverse the world's death that he had kind of already been resigned to and didn't think he could do anything about?
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. I mean, the world is healing. We're kind of told that a few times. The beams are healing, and as the beams heal, like, we can kind of imagine this as, we have this magic, right? We have this magic, we have these beams, and because of the old people's tinkering and rationality and technology, they tried to tap into the beams to use them for power, supplement the power of the beams with technology. And that was fallible. It was temporary, and it started to break down. And as it broke down, it took the power of the beams with it, and was threatening to take the Dark Tower itself with it. And then you add on the breakers and what they were doing, and you just a world that is collapsing, a world that is moving on. And he did not just prevent the tower from falling, we're told here. He saved the beams. The beams are regrowing. We were told specifically that perhaps these two beams are stitching up and getting stronger to where the other ones might reappear again one day. And the magic that kind of left the world all these years ago could be returning. So yeah, there's hope. There's future here. And I think you're right. And I think this is really important, because I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying the book has really, really, really focused on the fact that there's no reason for Roland to be going to the tower. Uh-huh. And this is, I think, another bit on that idea. Like, look, Roland, the world is getting better. The world is going to possibly return to what it was. You did it. Not only did you do it, but you could possibly have a chance to live in this better world.
Yeah.
You could, you're the last of the line of Eld. You could be the guy that reignites your kingdom, brings civilization back to this world. You could be that person if you stop.
Right. Yeah. Right. You go be Aragorn. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Turn, basically cease to be the ranger and become LSR, and obviously there's no way he's going to make that choice, but yeah, I think it is kind of, I like that. I hadn't considered, we're so stuck in his head as the character that it hadn't even occurred to me that he could even, have a meaningful life, but absolutely he could. Yeah. He's this, he's not only the last of his line, but he's the last who carries the knowledge of what it is to be a gunslinger. He could train a whole new generation of gunslingers and all of this. He could be the new Jedi Order and so on.
I just think back in the moments under the mountain Roland, for a brief moment, considers crying off on his quest, right?
Yeah.
Of taking Jake away from this, taking him somewhere, training him, becoming a father to this child, and raising him, and then the two of them with strength then striking out for the tower together. A thing that kind of ended up happening, although not in the same way.
Yeah.
But like even then, they had a tower to save.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, so like back then, even at, you could argue, his moment of least change that early in the story, he saw the potential of a life here. And I think one of the things, like, we're going to possibly figure out what's in this tower, right? And what's going to happen to Roland when he gets there. But it certainly seems that it's not going to be like, and then you were king, right? Like, it's just not, it's just not.
No. Yeah. That's not how the story ends. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's very interesting to think about. I hadn't thought about it that way. But I guess it's kind of funny to me because you're right that the story has been throwing us all of these hints that the world is healing and the beams are back. Everything's fixing itself. But it wasn't until we saw the Big Dipper that I kind of felt it emotionally. Like, oh, like Midworld is going to be back the way it was before all this horrible stuff started happening, you know?
Yeah. I think the stitching together of the world we've seen has pretty much been focused in Keystone World. I mean, like, we didn't, and even that we weren't told directly. It's just like, we looked at what the Tet Corporation has become and that there's these gunslingers walking around in this building. And we're like, oh, so like there's going to be this powerful force for the White that is going to carry on this gunslinger line and this power. And it's like, okay, so cool. It's like, it seems like reality is safe. But for it to make a real impactful end world, mid world moment, I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So Susannah dreams, Matt. Susannah dreams again, and once again sees Eddie and Jake in Central Park. Only this time there's a door there. It's the unfound door, and written upon it is the artist. But time is almost up, and Susannah knows at this point that if she isn't gone by the time she gets her first glimpse of the tower, she'll never leave. I think it's really important that Stephen King does introduce a ticking clock suspense element here, because there's just nothing else really. Like, right. We have Mordred out there, but like I'll call it the problem. It's not the problem, but a difficulty in the later half of this book is that they've won, and then there's really no rush anymore. And so King is constantly having to introduce these ideas, these important ticking clock moments to kind of keep suspense and keep pushing the story along. And I really like that the only reason the clock is ticking is because Roland won't stop. Like, she has to figure this puzzle out before Roland gets to the tower. But if Roland were just to like say, okay, well, let's just take a few days for you to figure this puzzle out, the ticking clock's gone.
That's true.
That's never going to happen because it's Roland.
Yeah, which I mean, like I said earlier, he's not going as fast as he can go, but neither is he stopping. He can't really stop. That is kind of funny. Yeah.
So not a lot happens until Susannah has her night with Patrick, where she realizes the magic of his drawings. But before we get to that, I just want to kind of talk to you about this portion of this chapter. They're out of the cold of Empathica now. It's getting warmer. The drum of the tower, the beat, 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 it's a little louder every day. These pages are just the story of two people who know they're going to be saying goodbye to each other soon, but aren't quite ready to say it yet. There's these moments of happiness, and they're just tinged with a little bit of sadness and melancholy.
Yeah, really powerful bittersweetness. I can't think of any other story I ever read that really had exactly this level of bittersweetness to it. You know, we've got all this physical and emotional misery of the recent times, which seems to have kind of dropped away, and it's leaving us with something very much like the pleasant trek that Roland had fantasized about when he was handed Insomnia, where he imagined, you know, just a nice familial journey with Susannah, except it's not like that, because there's this overriding melancholy because Susannah knows or feels that she's leaving, and also because we know that the book is ending, and so there's that costume there. And yeah, I mean, there's, like you just said, there's been so many metatextual elements in this story. I think one of them here is the book is ending and we don't want it to end. And that's, and I think in a sense, I'm reiterating something that you just said a minute ago, but that's what Susannah is doing, or that's the emotion that Susannah is living in right now, is this melancholy, knowing it's going to end, and feeling bittersweet about it, and also feeling a bit anxious about it because we don't really know how that's going to look.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's filled with moments like you talked about with the bonding over the stars, and then there's this wonderful little vignette with the buffalo, the herd of buffalo that she sees. And again, I think that's to your point about the world is healing. Now suddenly this is this herd of buffalo, which for us Americans, as Susannah rightly points out, it's like there's not that much buffalo left in the world, in our world. And so like this is life and renewal and hope, and when this giant herd of buffalo, and they both like get happy about it. And I love this moment where it says, I'd like to taste some fresh meat that isn't deer. Wouldn't you? She let her smile answer for Roland. Roland smiled back, and it occurred to her again that soon she would see him no more. This man she'd believed was either a mirage or a demon before she had come to know him, both Antet and Don Din. Eddie was dead. Jake was dead. And soon she would see Roland of Gilead no more. Would he be dead as well? Would she? So, it's really wonderful writing because, like, as you said, it's these moments of happiness, these moments of serenity and calm and peacefulness. And then her brain goes like, oh yeah, it's almost over. This is one of the last times I'm going to look at this person. And in life, like, you don't normally get to know that with people, like,
not normally.
I think it's very rare in life that like you're just sitting there with a person knowing that this is the last time I'm going to see this person.
Yeah, I mean, the closest I can think of is like, at the end of high school or the end of college or something, where you're like, odds are pretty good that this is the last time I'm going to see this person. For some subset of people. And that may not be true actually, but you might feel that it's true and feel that kind of heaviness to the moment. And so it's somewhat relatable, but yeah, I mean, that the whole point of this section is to kind of just repeatedly, remind us that this is what she's feeling.
Mm-hmm. So Susannah dreams again, and the dreams are getting more and more desperate. The Eddie and Jake in these dreams are a little bit more panicked. I love this football allegory here. It's the fourth quarter and the clock is ticking. You've got to figure it out, Suze. You have everything you need to figure it out. You've got to do it. I just love it. Yeah,
it's funny. That does seem more like what Eddie would say. But what's funny is like I think at this point my interpretation is that the dreams are actually being sent by the beam, who's using the guise of Eddie and Jake, and I don't know if there's ever going to be confirmation that is the case, but that was just kind of my feeling at this point.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's like, if you're trying to encourage Susannah to solve the puzzle, to find a way to get out of this journey, do it with the two people she's desperately missing. The love of her life and this boy that was family to her.
Yeah, right. And kind of implant in her this idea that like maybe she could find them out there.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same them that she left, but maybe some other them, and
there are many worlds.
Right. And that's clearly something that she's thinking about. I don't know if she's necessarily going to go hunt for Eddie in the multiverse, but I feel like that's something that's part of her rationale for like, once that occurs to her, it's almost like, well, I have to go find out.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind of how she tries to win Oy over to her side. That, hey, we could find Jake again. Don't you want to see Jake again?
Yeah, exactly.
So at this point, Susannah finally tells Roland what's going on. She tells him she needs to leave before they get to the tower, or else something will have gone very, very wrong. But she doesn't know how, and it's really frustrating her. And I'm curious if you had figured out this final puzzle yet at this point, Matt.
No, think I might have even I might have figured it out if I had thought more about drawing and how drawing is an element that also needed to be mirrored with the drawings that happen at the beginning of the story, and if I had thought about that more. But frankly, I thought I had figured out what Patrick's power was, and I thought it was prophecy. And then I just stopped thinking about it. So yeah, that's
it's so clever because it's one of those things that's right in front of your face because he's just drawing. King uses the word drawing over and over again to describe what Patrick is doing, but it's such a different meaning of the word that it never occurs to you. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I remember you kind of prompting me to think of all the different meanings of the word drawing back when back when the word was first introduced in the story, and I'm pretty sure drawing pictures was one of them, but it didn't come up in that book, and so I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're not going to explore that meaning. But no, he was saving it for 6 books.
He was saving it for 25 years later.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, this is Patrick Danville was one of those moments in the story where I was like super hesitant to say too much to you because I wanted these moments to land on you. The same thing with the eraser thing, like where if you go back and read the previous chapters, like the book makes a lot of noise about the fact that the erasers have been chopped off the pencils and why would that be? And it's all supposed to hint that, oh, well, his drawings are magic. But I didn't want to spoil that for you. So I couldn't. I think I pulled like just a reading where they talk about the fact that the erasers were chopped off the pencils, and I was like, all right, so I'm going to read this out loud, and it'll put it into his head. But like, I'm not going to say anything else.
It's nice of you to try to help me out, Scott. But no, I think that I just was like thinking of that as just like, yeah, Dandelo is a sadist, and he wants to make it even harder for Patrick.
I think that's kind of what King wants you to be thinking there.
Yeah.
So Roland, in response to Susannah's pleas and cries of she doesn't know what to do, kind of just does what he always does, where he says, "Don't worry about it. Let Ka handle it." And Susannah's response to that is, "You'd said we'd outrun it." He rocked her in his arms, rocked her, and it was good. It was soothing. "I was wrong," he said, as thee knows. It's just so sad. It's so sad and beautiful. I love it all.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, right. It's such a beautiful relationship between these two where, I mean, I think it's safe to say that this is like a completely platonic relationship, but
yes,
but just the friendly, the we don't have a word in English for this. It's a loving, it's a deeply loving relationship between a man and a woman that is not romantic at all.
No, yeah.
It's just it's beautiful.
And I wouldn't feel comfortable calling Susannah his daughter, and I wouldn't feel comfortable calling Susannah his sister either. So you're right. It's just this really unique relationship.
And she never does call him father.
No.
Which we kind of thought was going to happen, but I'm not surprised that it didn't, because it didn't go. I don't think it would have felt right.
No, and I mean, I think it's the reason. There's so many reasons why Susannah is unique, and it is why her fate in these stories is so different from everyone else's.
Yeah.
So then one night, Susannah is on watch, and Patrick comes to her scared because he sees the Hobbs, the St. Elmo's fire that just kind of float about at night. To calm him, she suggests that he draws. And Patrick does draw. He draws Susannah. And then we get this moment. And suddenly, she understood everything? Understood everything? Yes, she would think much later. Not in any coherent fashion that could be written down. If A plus B equals C, then C minus B equals A, and C minus A equals B. But yes, she understood everything, intuited everything. No wonder the Dream Eddie and Dream Jake had been impatient with her. It was so obvious. Patrick, drawing her. Nor was this the first time she had been drawn. Roland had drawn her to his world with magic. Eddie had drawn her to himself with love, as had Jake. Dear God, had she been here so long and been through so much without knowing what Ka-tet was, what it meant? Ka-tet was family. Ka-tet was love. To draw is to make a picture with a pencil, or maybe charcoal. To draw is also to fascinate, to compel, and to bring forward, to bring one out of oneself. The drawers were where Detta went to fulfill herself. Patrick, the tongueless boy genius, pent up in the wilderness, pent up in the drawers. And now Now? Now he's my four special, thought Susannah, Odetta, Detta, and reached into her pocket for the glass jar, knowing exactly what she was going to do and why she was going to do it.
Ah, man, I love everything about that. I love that it's Susannah / Odetta / Detta thinking it, doing the action, as if finally, truly, in this moment at the end, the three of them really are fused, that they really are all thinking and acting as one. And, you know, that's a beautiful way of doing that.
And King did our job for us a bit here, right? To just spell out what drawing is, and the drawers and all the drawing that's been happening. Thanks, Stephen.
He waited the entire series to be like, all right, just in case you didn't catch the drawing thing I was doing.
I love this. The one thing we didn't talk about though, like, you know, Roland had drawn her to his world with magic. Eddie had drawn her to himself with love. I love that line. That's so wonderful. Yeah. That's awesome. So we learn that Patrick's drawings are magical. He draws what he sees, and he can draw things that he doesn't see but only imagines. Susannah plucks the eraser out of her glass jar and commands Patrick to erase her blood blister off her mouth. And once it's gone from the picture, it's gone from real life. Yeah, it's pretty cool, although it does make me sad to remember that he made that X over Oy earlier, which I'm kind of not sure whether he actually, killed Oy by by drawing an X over him. So like I think that did stick out to me earlier when it happened, because I think I had an inkling. We had guessed previously, or I had guessed previously, that his pictures were magic, but my guess was that they were prophetic. That he drew things that were going to happen. And so I think maybe at least it occurred to me briefly that maybe him drawing an X over Oy was a prophecy of something that was going to happen. Now I'm more worried that he actually killed Oy. I don't really think that's true, but it's a connection I can't help but think about, though. I think Oy's death was prophesized literally 200 years ago when Roland first looked into the wizard's glass. So I don't think Patrick caused Oy's death. No, I do think it's prophetic in the way that sometimes books are just having fun with you. Like, I think King knew he was going to kill Oy, and that X over Oy is meant to unsettle you in a way that makes a lot of sense when you know what's coming. Yeah, and it's not like he drew a giant spider baby killing Oy. So that's very true. But he did draw Mordred standing over dead Arthur Eld's horse, which I guess I can't pretend that we don't write these scripts before we do the podcast, because as I got to this point in the script, I was like, I'm kind of worried, because the other Patrick, I don't know what that means, by the way, some other Patrick painted a beautiful painting of Mordred standing over Arthur Eld's horse, and then later on you're going to point out to me that there's another interpretation of that painting. which is much better and way more satisfying. It's a Mordred standing over another horse and eating that horse. Yes. Well, we'll get there. Yeah. I think I love that connection, so I can't wait to talk about it. But before we get there, I love this part, though, where Patrick has just erased the blood blister, and Susannah is terrified of reaching up to her face and touching her lip to see if that thing has been removed. And she says, "I don't dare." "You better dare," Detta responded indignantly. "After all you've been through, all we've been through, you must have enough backbone left to touch your own damn face, you yellow bitch." I love that so much. Like, it's just this moment of like, how could you be afraid of this point? And just like, it's Detta kind of once again falling into her role here of like pushing Susannah when she needs to be pushed. Yeah. It's funny because like, this isn't that far off of a way you might talk to yourself, Yeah. Like, you've smashed your thumb with a hammer or something. You're like, oh, fuck, I don't want to look. And then part of you is like, just look, just get it over with. Like that is, it's kind of your inner Detta. And, it's easy to be all supernatural about Detta Walker and Odetta Holmes and all that. But fundamentally, there's parts of the same person that speak to each other, which we all kind of do sometimes. Yeah. I have like so many voices in my head constantly talking to me. Don't we all? So Susannah instructs Patrick to draw the door from her dream, and she draws the symbol for the unfound door in the dirt to give him an example. And I really love this part here, Matt. She could remember the symbols, but it would be best if she didn't think about them overmuch. She sensed they had to be absolutely right, or the door she wanted him to make for her would either open on some place she didn't want to go, or would not open at all. Therefore, once she began to draw in the mixed dirt and ash by the campfire, she did it as rapidly as Patrick himself might have done, not pausing long enough to cast her eye back upon a single symbol. For if she looked back at one, she would surely look back at all, and she would see something that looked wrong to her, and uncertainty would set in like a sickness. Detta, brash, foul-mouthed Detta, who had turned out on more than one occasion to be her savior, might step in and take over, finish for her. But she couldn't count on that. On her heart's deepest level, she still did not entirely trust Detta not to send everything to blazes at a crucial moment, and for no other reason than the black joy of the thing. Nor did she fully trust Roland, who might want to keep her for reasons he did not fully understand himself.
Yep. It's funny. I no longer think that Detta is the kind of person who would ruin everything just for fun. I feel like she's grown as a character also, but Roland definitely might try to keep her, right?
Yeah, I do think it's important in this moment that she does not allow Detta to do the hard thing for her. She does the hard thing herself. And there was, to me, a little bit of a callback here to Eddie's work with the whittling the key in the Wastelands, right? That like you just have to go, like you just have to kind of clear your mind and go for it. If you look back over it, if you think about it too much, you'll mess it all up.
Right.
Just like the act of creation of something, the act of drawing is magical, and it requires calm mind, clear thought, and not overthinking it.
Yeah, and not doubting yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I do love Roland in these moments, though. Roland, who was already kind of detaching from Susannah, we've already said, and kind of maybe sensing her start to detach from him, and is kind of panicking because of it. Like, and I think it's really fitting to me that in this moment where she's drawing in the dirt and explaining what's going on, King finally lets us back in Roland's head very briefly. And we see here, "I don't think you were wrong," Roland told her. He spoke with obvious reluctance, but as a man will when he had a job to do, or a debt to repay. And he did owe this woman a debt, he reckoned, for had he not pretty much seized her by her scruff of the neck and hauled her into this world, where she'd learned the art of murder and fallen in love and been left bereaved, had he not kidnapped her into this present sorrow? If he could make that right, he had an obligation to do so. His desire to keep her with him, and at the risk of her own life, was pure selfishness, and unworthy of his training. More important than that, it was unworthy of how much he had come to love and respect her. It broke what remained of his heart to think of bidding her goodbye, the last of his strange and wonderful quartet. But if it was what she wanted, what she needed, then he must do it. And he thought he could do it, for he had seen something about the young man's drawing that Susannah had missed. Not something that was there, something that wasn't. I love this man so much, Matt, and I think this is such an important moment to put us in Roland's head. We just had this passage we read where Susannah said she's not entirely trusting of Roland because he might want to keep her here for reasons that he did not fully understand himself. And I think it's great to put that tension out there to make you question Roland. But I also think when we get to the point where it's happening, Susannah's leaving, we need to let that part of the tension go away. We don't want Susannah's goodbye to be tinged with fear of Roland, like refusing to let her go and like grabbing her by her scruff again and saying, "No, I will not let you leave." And so in this moment, King allows us back into Roland's head, and we see that he understands what's happening, and it's breaking his heart. But he's going to let her go because it's the right thing to do, because it's what he owes her. And I think that's so important.
It's incredibly important. I think it's sort of the culmination of his character arc in a way, because, I think as we're approaching the end, I think it's looking like a lot of my big end game predictions are not going to be right. Which, whatever. The point of this game is not to get the predictions right. It's not why we're doing this. But I am like, regardless of all of that, I am very happy and satisfied with the way that Roland has developed as a character, and where he is now. Like you were just saying, because now he is a man who is willing to let go of Susannah. And I think this is a mirror. This act is a mirror. It's an inverse of his choice to let Jake fall, because, letting Jake fall, he was letting go of Jake, but in a way that is completely selfish. He's surrendering a person that he loves into death so that he could have something that he wanted. And now this is a selfless choice. He's surrendering a person that he loves, but he's surrendering them to their freedom so that they can have what they need, and despite what he wants and what he needs. And that's, it's not the way I expected this to go, but it's the sort of character arc and growth that I expected, and I'm very satisfied, and I'm very happy to see this.
Yeah, I mean, it's love in action instead of just love in emotion. Like he talked so much in the Gunslinger about how he had grown to love Jake, and he loved this boy, and this love was a curse on him. Here is just love in action and true, right? Like I love that it was unworthy of how much he had come to love and respect her. This is so important. The idea that Roland can love and has learned to love again. And not only that he's learned to love, he's learned to let his heart open to these people, but he's learned to change because of that. Mm-hmm. Like it's one thing to say, I feel this immense feeling towards a person. It's another to allow that to dictate your choices. Yeah. And he is choosing in this moment to say, of course, I have to let her go. Yeah, I have to let her go.
I think a Roland, like a book or two ago, would have been thinking about, like, how do I sort of scheme to keep her with me? Like the Roland who didn't share information with his Katet. The Roland who sort of low key played people off each other to make sure that, the Roland who said the thing that he feared most is the breaking of the Katet and not the death of his loved ones. And now even since then he's grown a lot, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think we kind of see, I think you're right in that, because Susannah, who knows him better than just about anyone, sees that in him as well. Like there is this moment where she thinks that he is maybe trying to manipulate Patrick into staying with him. And he kind of gives her a look that says, I'm not letting him in my mind. Patrick, who has some sort of psychic power as well, some sort of touch. She says, no, I've closed off my mind to him. I don't want him to see what I want because I want him to make his own decision. So yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that is something that a past version of Roland would be capable of, because Susannah thinks he's capable of that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think just to clarify kind of what I thought was going to happen a while back is I thought that he was going to reach the tower with Jake and nobody else was going to make it except Jake. And then he was going to reach some decision where he either had to kind of let Jake go again, or he had to turn back and not reach the tower, and that he was going to choose to just turn back and keep Jake. That was like how I saw the story ending. Obviously not going to go that way, but this is basically the skeleton of the moment that I thought was going to happen, where he has a chance to pull Susannah along with him, right? And he chooses not to, right? So that's it's not exactly like I thought, but it's the basic outline of the thing that I thought was going to happen, and I'm happy to see it.
And I do wonder if that was his plan for an earlier version of the story, right? Like we had this moment where Fred King tells us, in my notes, they all made it. In my notes, none of these people died. And then what happened? Well, in between the time that he maybe outlined where he thought the story was going and the time where he actually sat down and wrote it, he got hit by a car and almost died.
Yeah.
And so it dramatically changed who he was and what he wanted to do with the story. And so he wrote the fact that one of his characters must be sacrificed to save him into the story. And it changed how the ending was going to go. So I do think you're right that spiritually and thematically it gets to a similar point. But I do wonder if there was a version in his head where as he approaches the tower, it's Jake at his side and he's given another choice by maybe not the Crimson, or not the Man in Black, but the Crimson King this time.
Right.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. And I mean, having written enough things, I can see that sometimes you write something in an outline that just doesn't work. It's not going to work.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
It's not even worth saying like this is what I planned to happen, because it's like, yeah, well, that wasn't going to work. So yeah.
So Roland has, of course, figured out this puzzle, Matt. The door was drawn, but it lacked context. A door without context is just a door. So Patrick draws it on the ground near the camp, and there it arrives. I want to talk about this idea of context before, because I really haven't quite wrapped my head all the way around this. But as I was prepping my notes this week, I just really I feel like there's some brilliant revelation about the thematic weight of context in making this door appear that I feel like is just on the tip of my tongue. So I'm kind of hoping we can just talk through it, and then I will have a revelation about this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the thing about this that jumps out to me is to wonder what the limits of Patrick's power even are, because seems pretty good. Like seems like the kind of thing that you could munch and exploit if you wanted to.
Sure.
And I do wonder where we're going to go with this. But the idea of context, that was a word, the way it's used here does kind of jump off the page as like, okay, what do we mean by this exactly? Why are we choosing to draw attention to this? Does this mean something higher than just, well, you can't just draw a freestanding door in white space. It needs to be in a setting. I mean, I don't think King is just talking about the details of Patrick's magical power. I think he's talking about something else, but I'm not sure either, though.
Yeah, I mean, we can just kind of talk about the act of creation, right? That to create, it is not enough to just make something beautiful. You have to put it in some sort of contextual meaning. You have to make it mean something, right? It's not enough to just make something. You have to make it mean something. And I think that's an idea that's really important to Stephen King, that like he writes all these stories, and like this is why, like, I feel like there's a lot of perception of this guy. We talked about this before, but I feel like there's a lot of perception of this guy as just this pop novelist who just writes horror schlock that's just fun to read. It's spooky, it's weird, and it's fun. And that's just that. I mean, look, that's all true. These books are spooky and weird and fun. Absolutely. But they're doing so much more than that. I mean, I don't think we could have a show in which we talk about this series for how many hours are we up to? Like 100 hours if the books weren't doing more than that. So it's not enough that you just draw a spooky monster.
Yeah.
You have to put it in some sort of context. You have to bring some meaning to truly bring it to life. And so if we're talking about a story has to mean something if it's truly going to feel real, if it's truly going to be a creation worth walking through.
Mm-hmm. It has to be anchored in reality, not just in terms of elements of the plot that you recognize, but in terms of emotional reality and character reality, which, I mean, you can have you can have a fantasy novel like Lord of the Rings that is anchored in the reality of the characters, and you're, that's the context there. The context, there's nobody's smuggling cocaine on an airplane, but there are things that you recognize about humanity. And like you said, meaning. I like that. I think that's very interesting. I also just, this is kind of a fleeting thought. I don't know if I can pin it down, but just the idea that like a magic door is kind of like a book, where it's a portal. It's a magical portal, and it seems benign, but you step through it and you're in another world. And so if a magic door is like a book and you have to give the magic door context before it manifests, then it's kind of the same idea. You have to give a book context before it can connect with you, the reader.
I mean, the doors are like almost literally in the series, they're books, because they literally open up on another world that was created by Stephen King.
Right.
And we kind of pluck characters out of what could be just a Stephen King novel.
Yeah. Or in some cases literally are when Callahan enters the picture.
Yep, that is very true. Yep. All right. So I like this part where like the time for Susannah's departure has come, and now she asked Patrick. She's like, "Hey, Patrick, you want to come with me?" But Patrick decides to stay because he's afraid of change. And I love this moment where it says, "And did she see relief on Roland's face? If so, she hated him for it." It's like, I love that it's really sad. She's about to say goodbye to Roland, this man who has become really important to her life, but she's feeling a real big mix of emotions right now.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think he is feeling relief, because I don't think that he's even close to being ready to go on alone.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if Patrick and Oy had really gone with Susannah. I mean, not only would Roland probably have just died, but just being alone. Yeah. You're right. He is not ready. And it's like she hates him for it, because I think Susannah at this point fully believes that Roland is taking Oy and Patrick to their doom, that they're going to die. If they do not come with her at this moment, they will die. And she's right on one count, at least so far. Yeah,
right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think Roland also must be aware that that's a likely outcome for both of them.
Yeah.
You know, I can't see how he could still believe that anybody but him is going to make it to the tower.
I don't know. I do really like this part where, as she prepares to say goodbye, Susannah lets Detta take over. Always better at the hard stuff was Detta, but Roland refuses her this. He says, "I'd not say goodbye to you like this after all this time," he said. "What do you mean?" Only in Detta's angry burlesque it came out. "What you mean?" "You know." Basically saying, "You'll not hide from me in Detta, Susannah, not this time." It's a really perfect moment. Roland has never liked Detta. We talked about this many times, and he's like, "Nah, I'm not saying goodbye to you. I'm not saying goodbye to Detta. You're going to come out here, Susannah, and you're going to say goodbye to me."
Yeah, no, it's beautiful.
But first, they've forgotten Oy, as everyone seems to now that Jake is gone. I mean, this is actually true. If you go back and read the sections of this book since Jake died, Oy is just missing from so much of it. Like he'll appear every once in a while. We'll be reminded of his presence. But like the way King writes it is sometimes we don't even like get a description of him or where he is or what he's doing. He just kind of fades from the book. And I think that's really important, because that's kind of exactly what damns Mordred in the end, right? That he forgot about Oy.
Yeah, it's what damns Mordred. It's what saves Roland. You know, it's the fact that, you know, I mean, it's become a low-key meme of the podcast, is like, "Oh, you're forgetting about Oy though. You listed all the quartet members, but you forgot Oy." But I mean, he's actually done so much for them, you know, as a character, and it's not fair. It's not fair to him. But yeah.
And then we get this point. "Oy," she said gently, "will you come with me, honey? It may be we'll find Jake again. Maybe not quite the same, but still." Oy, who had been almost completely silent during their trek across the Badlands and the White Lands of Empathica and the open rangelands, now spoke. "Ache?" he said, but he spoke doubtfully, as one who barely remembers, and her heart broke. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, and Detta all but guaranteed she wouldn't cry. But now Detta was gone, and the tears were here again. "Jake," she said. "You remember Jake, honey bunch. I know you do. Jake and Eddie." "Ache? Ed?" With a little more certainty now, he did remember. "Come with me," she urged, and Oy started forward as if he would jump up in the cart beside her. Then, with no idea at all why she said it, she added, "There are other worlds than these." So this is beautiful. I mean, first of all, her saying there are other worlds than these completely completes the mirrored Jake's goodbye to Susannah's goodbye that you were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah,
like these scenes are constructed to bounce off each other in similar ways. As you said, the point of this is not to show that Roland letting Jake die and Roland letting Susannah go are the same, but actually to make them similar enough to highlight the differences, which is just a writing trick that I really, really love. When you make two things similar, the parts of them that are different stand out way more. And that's exactly what's happening here.
Right.
And it's really wonderful.
And hear her saying it, she's rather than saying it in a condemnatory fashion. She's saying it to hold out a hand to someone, to offer them a possibility.
It's hope.
Yeah, a hope. Exactly. Yeah.
Did you believe for a minute that Oy forgot about Jake?
No, I wanted to talk about this. God, it's so hilarious that you said that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I didn't even write it in the script. I was going to say, no, I think he's just confused, because he's like, Jake's dead, Susannah. Susannah, Jake's dead.
Yeah.
And like probably just baffled that she's acting like they could go meet Jake, because he knows that's. I mean, I think it's on some level he has his kind of mystical Billy Bumbler wisdom, and he's like, he's right here actually. Like, yeah.
I mean, the thing about Oy is that he already thinks he's going to go meet Jake.
Yes,
because he's going to his death, and he knows he will meet Jake again at the path at the end, at the clearing at the end of the path. Like that. So he's like, that's Susannah. That's what I'm doing. Right.
Which is not something we talked about back when we were in his head briefly, but isn't it amazing that he expects that he's going to meet with Jake again when he dies? Like he's a, I mean, he's a dog creature, but clearly he's got more intelligence, right? He's got enough intelligence to understand death and have a conception of it. And, I mean, yeah, I think he is a bit magical, right? I think the idea was that he was going to follow Jake, sort of follow the scent of Jake in a metaphysical sense, not a literal sense. Yeah. And that's what he's doing. He's like, you're not going to Jake, I'm going to Jake.
Yeah.
I did not believe that he forgot about Jake.
No, never. Absolutely not. Yeah. In fact, I was almost insulted that Susannah would even think that.
Yeah, exactly. I like that we both agree on this, even though the text doesn't really support it.
And of course, Oy does not go with Susannah, and we get this wonderful part. Instead, Oy trotted back to the gunslinger and sat beside one battered boot. They had walked far, those boots. Far. Miles and wheels, wheels and miles. But now their walking was almost done. Olin, said Oy, and the finality of his strange little voice rolled a stone against her heart. She turned bitterly to the old man with the big iron at his hip. There, she said. You have your own glamour, don't you? Always did. You drew Eddie on to one death, and Jake to a pair of them. Now Patrick, and even the Bumbler. Are you happy? No, he said, and she saw he truly was not. She believed she had never seen such a sadness and such loneliness on a human face. It's awful.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, once again, it's not textual, but Oy is not choosing Roland over Susannah here. He's almost saying, no, I promised Jake I would stay with Roland.
Yeah. That's also what I thought. He's like, I have my job. I'm still doing my job.
Yeah. I still got a job to do, and I'm going to do it. And that's the finality in his strange little voice rolled a stone against her heart.
Yeah. God, I still read everything that Oy says in the voice of the previous voice actor who passed away, Frank Muller.
I actually don't know how Guidal says Oy, because all I've read from him is the first book when there was no Bumbler.
Yeah, it's Owen, yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But then, Matt, Roland breaks down. He loses it. He drops to his knees and he begs Susannah to stay. It's a trick, he says. It's a trap. The door leads to Todash space, to your doom. You can't go. You can't leave me. But she's made up her mind, of course. She's going. This is shocking, is it not?
It is, yeah. I mean, all of Roland's behavior from here on is shocking, and yet feels right. Like, it feels right that he would break, because this is the most emotionally broken that we've seen him in the story, really. I mean, even when Jake died, even when Susan died, in a sense, even when Roland was dying of sepsis on the beach, he had more dignity than this, right? But this is the last person that he loves, leaving him after his Katet taught him how to love again, and kind of reminding him how much he hates being alone, and how he kind of is his worst self when he's alone, and it's so cruel. Like, it's such a cruel thing to do to him, to teach him how to love, and then to strip that away, to strip all those people again, leave him alone, but now knowing the pain of being alone. And I think that's why he break. Like, if anything, the reason I think this is so powerful is that the only reason he breaks down and it hurts him so badly is that he has changed so much, and
Yes.
that the Roland at the beginning of the book didn't love anyone and didn't barely even remembered how to love, and now he knows what he's losing. He knows exactly what he's losing by losing Susannah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how the chapter ends, right? That he sits here alone, and it says, it occurred to him that if he had never loved them, he would never have felt so alone as this.
Yeah.
Yet of all his many regrets, the opening of his heart was not among them, even now.
Yeah.
And that's so important that, like, and I think it does matter that she's choosing to leave him too, which is not something Roland has had to deal with very often, right? Like, he's lost people time and time again. He's lost people, but it's so rare in Roland's long history that someone looks at him and looks at his journey and looks at being part of his family and goes, nah,
yeah,
I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go get some cocoa. That is a choice that he's not used to, and so he loses it.
Yeah, it is so interesting. I mean, I don't think we're going to get an answer within the story as to why Susannah is so unique, but she really, really is. Like, Ka did not pull her in the same way that it pulled in the others. We've talked about it a million times, but she never really did get her vision of the tower. Even when she has her dreams in this book, in the last few chapters, they're not at all the same dreams that the others got, and it's just she doesn't have that connection, doesn't have that pull. Her Ka is not really bound up with Roland's in the same way that the others were, and I'm still not really sure why, but it is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Matt. So Susannah turns and drives through the open door and out of the story. I love this one final moment as Roland calls to her, wait, one last time, but she doesn't. She doesn't turn around, and she walks through the door, and the door slams shut behind her, and she's gone.
Yeah. And now at least the Roland that is approaching the tower is no longer a monster or a beast, but a loving human being. So
yeah, thank God.
So there's the sweetness to the bitter, but yeah, I mean it's a sad moment, and then of course we're going to move on to Roland just being so sad. Yeah.
Before we move on to that, though, I know you said that there's no reason textually in the book, and you didn't expect to get one, but why do you think Susannah is so different? Why do you think that Susannah from the beginning of the story has been a person that has just not been the same as the rest of them, and here has a different conclusion from the rest of them?
I think I can riff on it. I mean, so I just used the term, Susannah's Ka is not bound up in Roland's, which Ka in this usage is just story, right? And we kind of figured that out. So her story is not bound up in his. And that makes sense to me from a storytelling perspective, because, Eddie was a young man sort of seeking a new big brother or a new father who would be better to him than the one that he had. Jake was a boy in need of a parent, in need of a father who could actually be a father, unlike his real father. These are two characters and Roland, for his part, he kind of needed them, right? So their characters kind of form an immediate coupling with Roland's in that way. Whereas Susannah, she doesn't need a father, she doesn't need a big brother. Her arc is something completely different. Her arc is finding peace with herself, is finding out how to be okay with this broken mind of hers and find peace with it and find some kind of balance, which I think she does by the end here. I mean, here, she's sort of sharing space with Detta, right there. She's using Detta as she needs, and then there's an ebb and flow and a seesaw, and it's all balanced. And this has nothing at all to do with Roland. So the story, if you're going to write down the bullet points of like, what is Susannah's story, what is her arc, Roland's name shows up in that list relatively few times. So it would seem, if anything, a bit contrived if like somehow he comes to dominate her story, because that's just not what her struggle is. Do you feel me there at all?
Yeah, I got you. I mean, you could say Eddie's tower was external, Jake's tower was external, Roland's tower is of course external, but Susannah's tower was internal.
Mm-hmm.
It was always dealing with herself, and she grew to do that, and therefore she didn't need to go anywhere. She didn't need to complete this journey, because the journey was inside of her.
Yeah.
And so she was able to do that, and then she gets to go on her way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Cool. We figured it out.
We did. All right, Matt, we've been putting it off. We talked for an hour and 20 minutes because we were just not wanting to get to this chapter. Basically, you and I just sat together and just stitched some hides for a few days.
We did.
To avoid getting to chapter 2.
Yep.
But we're here now and we have to. So let's talk about chapter 2, titled Mordred. And we move from Susannah's goodbye back into Mordred's point of view as he watches basically everything we've just seen from afar. The realization of Patrick's power, Susannah's goodbye. But we also learn that something's not right with Mordred, Matt. Mordred's a-dying.
Uh-huh.
Surely those 3 who remained, 4 counting himself, had outrun Ka's umbrella. Not since the Prim receded had there been such a creature as Mordred Deshane, who was part hume and part that rich and potent soup. Surely such a creature could never have been meant by Ka to die such a mundane death as the one that now threatened. Fever brought on by food poisoning. So it goes on to say in a little bit of time, Ka could have no part in this. And this is, I think we can speculate, Mordred trying to understand what's going on here and being like, this can't be Ka. It doesn't make sense. But as we learned in the last chapter, it is, dude. Of course it is. It's all Ka, right?
Right.
And this is just him thinking I'm some great, important, prophesized creature. There's no way something like me could die as a silly way of this, but of course you could.
Yeah, well, there's a sense in which King is lampshading the fact that it's anticlimax, right?
Yes.
I mean, it literally is the character thinking, this is anticlimactic, I can't die this way, I'm Mordred, the prophesied being. Mm-hmm. And what's really great, and I think beautiful, is I bet that's what Walter Odetta was thinking as he was ripping his own tongue out. That happened, right? Or was it his eyes? I get I get it all confused. There's so much ripping out of body parts.
Hey, Matt, it was both of them.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's good to remember. Yeah, because I mean that was the thing. Is like I think quite reasonably, some people have the sense of like, no, this isn't how the great Walter Odetta goes out. But it's like, no, that this isn't that kind of story. Mm-hmm. This is not a story where Roland is going to have a really badass showdown with Walter Odetta or with Mordred. It's a painful story of loss.
Yes.
And that's where this is going, actually.
Yeah. So this is when we learn here that Mordred has eaten Lippy, the old creepy horse, and Lippy was sicky. Lippy was not healthy, and so eating the meat, the way King describes like how the meat felt to Mordred as he ate it is like, this horse has been dead for a few days. Why is the blood so like mushy? It's so gross. But of course, this is when I remind you, Matt, of Patrick Danville's photo of a young Mordred standing triumphantly on the corpse of a white horse.
So it was a magic painting. It was just way more literal than I thought it was going to be.
Just the wrong horse. That's all.
I mean, it's funny. I do wonder if like that Patrick who painted it like knew what he was doing or what. Yeah. Not that there's going to answer there, but that's funny.
It's the type of thing, like, it's why prophecy is so funny, right? Because like you prophesize that like there will come a great person and he will take down the mighty. And I've seen this because we saw an image of this mighty Mordred standing on top of this white horse that must be the horse of Arthur Eld, right? Like that's just the silliness of prophecy, where you see these things and you decide it means one thing. That doesn't necessarily have to mean that.
Yeah, actually, it meant that he was going to eat that horse. I mean, what's funny is like I don't know if there's anything to this. I might have to go back and reread that part, but we talked about the idea that there was like this weird, uncomfortable sexual energy coming off of the Mordred in the picture, and I'm wondering if like was that somehow supposed to convey that he was like feverish actually.
Ooh, interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Which I don't know if it quite works because he hasn't actually eaten the horse yet, but it's evocative anyway.
It is.
That's great.
So we're back with Roland again. And in this early part of the chapter, as we said, he's not doing great. He's exhausted. He's grieving, and he's so ready to be done with everything. I think at one point he says he pulls his grief on the wagon that he's pulling down the road, right? And it keeps getting heavier and heavier and heavier. It's a wonderful image. But he sees a rose for the first time, a great symbol that he's getting closer to the tower now, because he sees a rose just like the rose that sat in that corner lot. And I pulled this quote out just for you, Matt. It was a light pink shade on the outside and darkened to a fierce red on the inside. The exact color, he thought, of heart's desire.
Yeah, well, I don't know what to do with that. Given all of our red pink talk, it's blending the two, right? It's lust and love, maybe. And I'm still not sure if these are like magical roses. I mean, I know that the roses are supposed to sing. I think that was in one of the dreams.
Yes. Roland also reasons here that the roses are what powers the beams.
Okay.
Is what we've been told.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I won't think too much about it, but it is. This is the first time I can remember where an object is described as being both red and pink at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can say definitively now that I loved your red pink stuff. I don't think it lines up in every moment. I don't think there's this clear delineation here, but I do like this moment in which heart's desire has both of these things, right? Yeah. Sometimes your heart desires this deep, fierce love. Sometimes it desires, you just want to get some.
Yeah, right. I mean, that is an interesting thing that was always kind of in the back of my mind is like, you can have both in the same relationship.
Sure.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, and I don't know what it means that he kind of took so long to show us a symbol that has both colors in it, or if it means anything. I mean, I'm sure he's aware of it, right? Like I'm as sure as I am about anything that I've picked out of the story that the red and the pink mean something. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what else to say about it.
Sure. So I want to stop and talk about this part for a bit, again, to waste time so I don't have to talk about Oy dying. This is when Roland is looking at Patrick, and we see the young man frowned and cocked his head, still not understanding. His hair hung to one shoulder in a bright sheaf. Roland thought of how Susannah had washed that hair in a stream in spite of Patrick's hooted protests. It was the sort of thing Roland himself would never have thought to do, but it made the young fellow look a lot better. Looking at that sheaf of shining hair made him miss Susannah in spite of the rose's song. She had brought grace to his life. It wasn't a word that had occurred to him until she was gone. So I wanted to talk about grace a little bit here, Matt, because grace is the text kind of calls out this word very specifically here. It wasn't a word that had occurred to him until she was gone. And we talked last week about Susannah and Christian imagery that the book had kind of thrown our way a lot in the last couple weeks. And there was so much of it. There was the Our Father, there was Ash Wednesday. And grace is a word that in the Christian sense has a very specific meaning, right? Grace in the Christian sense is basically like the love and mercy that God feels for his children, us. And the most important part of this idea of grace in Christianity is that it's not something that's earned. It's not something that it's merited. You just get it. You just get it because that's how awesome God is, right? Uh-huh. And I think this is very important in Roland's context here, because he's not saying that Susannah brought kindness and favor and love into my life because I earned it. He's almost saying it's the opposite, that this woman loved me. This woman brought this thing, this favor and this kindness into my life in spite of who I was, that I didn't deserve this, that I didn't earn this, that nothing I did made it so I earned this grace. And yet she still brought it anyway. And now she's gone. And I love it. I love it like that. I think it's such a powerful word to use there. And I think by kind of, laying the tracks for all this Christian imagery through the last few chapters, I think we can kind of suss out that it's a different kind of grace than just like the clinical definition of the word.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And it does remind me that, you know, Susannah had a lot of complicated and sort of ambivalent feelings toward Roland, even, you know, throughout the story. You know, he was this guy who dragged her out of her home and put a gun in her hand and taught her to be a killer. And for that, she kind of loved him, and also maybe didn't necessarily think that was the greatest thing at the same time. Like different parts of her had different feelings, but in the end, in summation, I think that she did love him, and it was a kind of just loving him for who he was.
Yes.
Without him having needed to do anything for her.
Mm-hmm. That's grace. That's what it is.
Yeah. And of course, you know, for the record, grace is also an important idea in Lord of the Rings, because it's a Christian idea. I mean, because Tolkien was so influenced by his faith. But yeah, I mean, the characters in that story are occasionally getting out of scrapes due to what you might call grace or divine intervention or what have you, which is rather different than what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to me because it's both Tolkien and King taking a spiritual religious term and then interpreting it through their own personal lens. Tolkien being a very religious person, King not so much, King being more of a spiritual person than a religious person. But I don't think the use grace here has to mean like Roland was seeing God through Susannah's actions. Like this. It's almost as if you could make an argument that Susannah is showing herself to be godlike in her willingness to extend this grace to him. And I don't know. I just adore that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Godlike or Christ-like. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's because I mean, the idea is that God loves you, forgives you, and is going to save you regardless of the fact that you're a sinner. That's how that works. And Roland is definitely a sinner, you know, in terms of the way he treats people and other things. But that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, it's so much fun to talk about this kind of stuff. But let's move on.
Okay.
To Oy. So Oy, we see in this chapter, is depressed. He's not eating. He's just kind of laying there. He's not making a sound again. And Roland gets kind of frustrated with Oy in this moment. He's sad, he's grieving, and he's frustrated. And he takes this out on the poor Billy Bumper, scolding him and yelling at him, saying, if you wanted to leave, you should have left. And of course, we know the real reason why Oy is like this, and we'll get to it soon. But I'm just so fascinated by Roland in the early parts of this chapter. He's just so fucking done. He's so sad and tired. He's angry. He hates that he's alone, and he hates that he's allowed himself to feel this way again, right? Like we talked about, he has no regrets about opening his heart like this, but it still sucks in the moment to feel this grief and heartbreak.
Yeah.
And he's such a pitiable creature in this part.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word that occurred to me was basically pitiful, which is essentially the same as pitiable, where it or even perhaps pathetic, which seems, you know, cruel, but it's not like I'm judging him. It's like he's definitely not acting like himself.
Yeah,
we've never seen him act like this, actually. No.
He's even talking differently, isn't he? I think this is a really interesting thing that the book doesn't really remark on, but we have this moment where he's talking to Patrick, and he says, all right, can he see how get Rosengaff at tweak it better? He asks, striving to sound comic, only sounding cross and tired. What?
No. I mean, this is so weird, right? Like he's totally unable to remain like the tough, stoic gunslinger facade. And he's just saying it's like he's becoming a kid, and he's like, he just wants, he feels so bad that he made the puppy sad that he's gonna like make a fool of himself in a way we've never seen him do before, so that the puppy won't be mad at him anymore. You know, like it just shows how low he is and how desperate he is for connection. And he's never really, I don't think he's ever fully seen Oy as like a first class member of the Cotet, but he's like, he's going to take it where he can get it, Yeah.
And so that sentence I just read, do you understand what he's even saying there? He's saying, can you tell how to make your drawing of the rose a little better, right? Like that's what he's saying. Can he see how get Rosengaff a tweak it better?
I think that when the audiobook reader read it, he twisted the words so that it kind of sounded like English, but it's really hard to parse in the written form. Can you see how get, I don't know, a Rosengaff? I don't think I would have figured that out, honestly. A tweak it better.
A tweak it better.
Striving to sound a comic. No, Roland, you still need to work on that comedy. Yeah.
Not such a great stand-up comedian, Roland.
No.
He learned nothing from Dandello.
Exactly.
The other big thing to talk about here is not only is he tired of mind and tired of spirit, but he's tired of body as well, right? This exhaustion is really starting to catch up to him. And the real showdown between Mordred and Roland here is one of two people that are just like super tired and like the one who falls asleep first loses, right? Like, and of course it's Roland who falls asleep first, and he assigns Patrick to the watch. Patrick, of course, falls asleep himself, but he's lulled to sleep by pulses from the Dark Tower itself, right? It's so interesting. We see this from Mordred's point of view, and we kind of see that Mordred communicates to the Crimson King who's talking to him, and he says, hold on, I'll help you. And then the pulse from the tower changes and kind of turns into a lullaby.
Yeah.
So we know the king stuck in the tower, but he seems to retain like some mild control over it in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, also the Crimson King is super psychic. So I just assumed that as psychic as Mordred is, seemingly able to pierce through, thinking caps easily, the Crimson King must be even more psychic. And so maybe he's just doing this remotely, or maybe he's kind of hijacking the tower's power to do this. This was another moment that made me feel a lot of pity for Mordred, because it makes you realize that potentially his whole life, and certainly now, the Crimson King is sort of blasting his brain with psychic manipulation.
Yeah.
To the point where it's questionable what control he even has over what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because like both of them are being drawn to the tower, Roland by the tower itself, Mordred by the Crimson King.
Mm-hmm.
And you just talked about like that reference back in Drawing of the Three that we've turned back to so many times, where this threat of Roland arriving at the tower, a monster. And it seems like that's if Mordred, let's say, were to get to the tower, that seems like that's exactly the threat, right? It's like Mordred has become a monster.
Yeah.
And so they're once again, they're similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's here we go. We go. So it's this time when the sick and dying Mordred strikes. But of course, as we mentioned before, he's forgot about something. He forgot about Oy. Oy pounces and bites down hard on one of Mordred's leg, and Mordred in return breaks the bumbler's spine. And I have to read this paragraph because it's heartbreaking. Red eyes, full of insanity and malevolence, peered at him over Oy's contorted body. Above them, high on the curve of the spider's back, were tiny blue eyes, hardly more than pinholes. They stared at the gunslinger with a hate that was all too human. My own eyes, Roland thought with dismay, and then there was a bitter crack. It was Oy's spine. But in spite of this mortal injury, he never loosened his grip on the joint where Mordred's leg joined his body, although the steely bristles had torn away much of his muzzle, bearing sharp teeth that had somehow closed on Jake's wrist with gentle affection, tugging him towards something Oy wanted the boy to see. Ache, he would cry on such occasions. Ache, ache. This is just such good writing, though.
Yeah, I don't have much in the way of notes from here on, because it's all just going to be me making sad sounds. But I just love, this is, I can't express how much I love this paragraph. Like the way it goes from the violence of the battle and the horror of the visual of it and the violence being done to Oy's face, and then cutting directly from that in mid sentence to remembering that this is the muzzle that used to gently grip Jake's wrist and tug him to show him something, some neat thing that he had sniffed out, and reminding you of that in that moment, right? Like,
yeah,
God,
it's so fucking good. It's maximally tragic. What I love about it is the sentence in which Oy's spine cracks is a sentence that starts with "my own eyes," Roland thought with dismay. He looks up at Mordred and he sees his eyes, and then in that moment, Oy's spine breaks. And that, along with the end of that paragraph in which Roland is thinking fondly of that these very teeth, these same teeth were the ones that gripped Jake's wrist. He feels so much guilt in this moment and so much responsibility. My own eyes, Roland thought, I did this. This is another member of his family is dying. Another member of his family is dying for him. I did this. This is my fault. And it hurts so much.
Yeah, no, it's, I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about it other than absolutely. It's such a, I mean, it's such a noble death for Oy. I mean, I guess that's the one thing about it that it feels, at least narratively like, okay, well, at least we have that. I was going to say narratively good, but it's like, no, it doesn't feel good at all. It's more like in contrast to something like Eddie's death, where you were just like, but they had already won.
Yeah.
And then he dies for no reason. Like, at least this is Oy fulfilling the last wish of his beloved boy, who he loved more than anything, and sacrificing himself in a noble way to save Roland. And now, I'm just going to choose to believe that he gets to go and see Jake now, because otherwise I'll be way sadder.
He was a good boy, and good boys go to see their master.
Yes, they do.
So Mordred tosses Oy away, impaling him on a tree, which of course makes the wizard's glass prophecy from hundreds of years ago come true exactly as Roland saw it. And then Roland, in that moment of distraction, opens up on Mordred, killing him. He shoots him 3 times, kills him. And we hear in this moment, "My son, my only son, you've murdered him." "He was mine too," Roland said, looking at the smoldering monstrosity. He could own the truth. Yes, he could do that much. So Matt, before we move on to the sadness of Oy that's going to wrap up this chapter, that's the end of Mordred. That's it. What'd you think?
Well, I mean, the book points out for us that this is a bit anticlimactic relative to what we might have expected. We might have expected some kind of amazing showdown between Spider Monster and Gunslinger. I mean, I think this is still a narratively correct moment, if that makes sense. We have he hunted them and stalked them, and ultimately he did cost the Katet something. And so, that's pretty much what I thought was going to happen. I think in the end, I might have thought he was going to serve a bigger role. I did predict that he would, we called him something of a golem. I would have expected that if he were a golem, that he would have played a more central role in how things ended. Whereas, all he sort of did here was kill Oy and then be killed. And I'm still not sure what the deal was with like the mark on his body that Odem thought that he was going to
open the tower, right?
That's what
open the tower.
I mean, that's what he thought. I mean, we don't. Yeah. So I don't know what the deal is with that. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't Roland just leave the body there?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't need it. He's got his gun.
He's got his guns, but I mean, I guess we just assume that works just as well. I don't know, but I guess maybe the idea is that either marking would have worked, but we'll see about that probably. Yeah,
I mean, there are some people that have kind of been disappointed by this, and I don't think it's because they wanted a big, long, extended showdown. I mean, I think you're right that there is a big, long, extended showdown. It's just one done from the shadows when the two are just kind of like feeling each other out over time. And then the final moment, as it always does in this book, happens very quickly. But I think the disappointment people feel is that, he doesn't play a pivotal role in the climax of the story. But I do think this really does line up correctly with the way in which evil in this story, just like in Tolkien's books, tends to defeat itself. It was Mordred's greed that fucked him over, because he just gobbled up that horse without thinking about it. His kind of immaturity, his childishness, and his lack of training or a father figure to teach him not to eat dead, rotting, gross looking horse meat, and then again, his lack of patience in rushing to attack Roland when Oy was still, I love the moment when Roland looks over to where Oy is, and he seems to be like hunkering down far away from the camp in the grass or whatever it is, and he sees Oy's eyes, and the eyes wink out, and that was basically Oy being like, I'm the one who's standing guard. Which, I know this is the night I'm waiting. So some people are disappointed by that Mordred did not have a big important role to play, but I agree with you. I just never thought this was that kind of story.
There's a sense in which every major bad guy in this story has had an ignominious and anticlimactic death. Like, yes, I'm thinking all the way back to like Jonas, where you're like, oh, this is going to be sweet. They're going to, tumbleweeds going to blow between them, and then no, it's like he just rides up to him and fucking shoots him in the head. And with Jonas doesn't even like draw. It's that's the kind of thing that happens in this story. There's just not like big fantasy, like triumphant battles in this book. It's just not what it's doing. I think King is not trying to glorify violence in this book, which is interesting because the main character is this gunslinger who you think of as being like, oh yeah, badass, he's gonna shoot it's like, thinking that shooting people is badass is a thing that King is trying to address with the book, actually.
Sure.
It's usually not, actually. It's usually horrible and sickening, and it damages the people who have to do it, even if they're really good at it. And you shouldn't want to shoot people. It's bad for you. Yeah.
All right, Matt, here we go. The gunslinger let that thought go and went to the tree where the last of his quartet hung, impaled, but still alive. The gold ring eyes looked at Roland with what might almost have been weary amusement. Oy, Roland said, stretching out a hand, knowing it might be bitten and not caring in the least. He supposed that part of him, and not a small one either, wanted to be bitten. Oy, we all say thank you. I say thank you, Oy. The bumbler did not bite, and spoke but one word. Olin, said he. Then he sighed, licked the gunslinger's hand a single time, hung his head down, and died.
Let's just take a moment to compose ourselves from this.
This one fucks me up, Matt. And I was so sad when Eddie died. I was so sad when Jake died. But this is the one that breaks me. This is the one that I like. First of all, I'm a dog person. So like I finished reading this and I found my dog and immediately hugged my dog and cuddled with my dog for an hour. And then I finished prepping for this episode and I did the same fucking things because it doesn't matter how many times I read these words, it's going to fuck me up every time.
Yeah.
Like, cause I can see my fucking dog doing this, like licking my hand in pain and then dying. Like,
yeah. I was thinking about deaths in stories and how they affect us, or at least how they affect me. And I was thinking that the more innocent and selfless the death, the more it hurts me.
Yep.
And interestingly, I mean, in this story, we've kind of gone more innocent with each death. I mean, Eddie was a young man, but I don't think you would call him an innocent. But that still hurt. And then Jake is much more of an innocent. He's a kid, and he died about as selflessly as you possibly can. And then here Oy is, a full innocent, an animal not even capable of conceiving of evil, who sacrificed his life on the orders of his beloved master. And I think that is what makes it saddest for me. I was trying to think through this, like all of the deaths in fiction that have really affected me, and I think that's one of the more important parameters for me.
I think it's for me, like it's the sighing and it's saying Roland's name one last time.
Yeah.
And then the sighing and the licking of his hand. But I think the thing that really gets me is the weary amusement.
Yeah.
He's ready.
Yeah.
He's like, I get to see Jake again. And it's just like, fuck.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he's even glad, like, hey, I did what I was supposed to do. I saved Roland. And one thing that I was thinking about during this part was the line where he was killing all the little horrible evil bugs in the Dixie Pig, and the text says that this is what he was made for. And I realized, like, well, here he is killing a bug again, or at least fighting a bug for the quartet.
You are 100% right.
Yeah, it's what he was made for.
That is what this is what Oy was for, and and he did it, and
he did it successfully, and he did what he was supposed to do. So I totally believe that he could be, amused or pleased with himself, even though he's probably in horrible pain.
Yeah, I mean, I think since Jake died, Oy's heart has not been in much of anything. I mean, there was that moment where Roland seriously thought that he would not leave Jake's side. He would stay remaining at his grave until he died of starvation or a predator came and picked him off. He did not do that because he knew his work wasn't done yet, and he had a little bit more to do. And of course, his little bit more to do is just what everyone does for Roland, sacrificing their life for him again and again and again. We move on to the next day where Roland is just beside himself once again, saying, "I only kill my family," he thinks. And this is why he thinks Patrick is probably going to be safe from Roland's terrible curse, because he's not a member of his family. It's only my family that I kill, which, I mean, if we want to go way back in time, we can go all the way back to the palaver with the Man in Black the first time, where he handed him the death card and said, "Death, gunslinger, but not for you."
Yeah.
This is the manifestation of that everyone around him dies.
Yeah. I mean, his quartet, I mean, God, he's literally killed several members of his family. He literally, if quartet does mean family, he killed Alan.
Yep.
With his own hand. He killed his mother with his own hand.
That's true.
He killed his son here with his own hand.
And his son with his same blue bombardier eyes killed Oy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then other members of his family he kills in the sense that he drags them into these situations and then they die. But so many of them he's literally shot.
Yep. You're right.
So, yeah.
And I think the part of this that makes it so tragic is Roland is doing the thing that I think we all do if we lose a loved one, remembering the last words we say to them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's beating himself up because he was so cruel to Oy in the days that led to this, not realizing that the reason why Oy was so sad and not eating is because he knew that his end was coming. He knew that this was going to happen. That's why he didn't go with Susannah. That's why he wasn't eating. That's why he had this sad look on his face, because he knew his time was almost up.
Yeah.
What a good boy.
Good boy.
I want a stuffed animal Oy for my son so badly, and nobody sells them. I can't find them. So if someone knows where I can get an Oy stuffed animal, please let me know.
So isn't a Billy Bumbler sounds very similar to like a tanuki, which is like a Japanese a raccoon dog.
Is that like the suit that Mario gets in Mario 3?
I'm 90% sure that is the suit that Mario gets in Mario 3. So you could just look into getting him a Tanuki doll, actually. This only occurs to me now.
Yeah, and I'll just call it Oy.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I'll do that. All right. So before we get to the end, there's just this one part that I think is really great here, Matt. Roland is furious because Patrick starts to draw him. As Roland is sitting there with the corpse of Oy in his lap, mourning his dead friend, Patrick begins to draw him. He's furious at the boy to the point where he puts his gun down before he approaches him because he's afraid of what he might do. But I think it's really important that it is Susannah's voice that calms him here in the end. Susannah's voice that comes through and explains to him, this is just how Patrick handles stuff, Roland. He doesn't know how to, his heart's broken too. He just met y'all, but his heart is broken too. And it's one more bit of Susannah's grace that makes Roland, understand this poor kid who doesn't know what to do except for draw things.
Yeah. That's how he processes his grief.
Yeah. I love it.
And, it's not like a psychic voice of Susannah. It's just his internalization of Susannah, which is sort of what it is to love someone. I mean, this is hitting me like kind of a light bulb right now, but like we talked a bit about the idea that different characters have voices in their heads and in a way that's a bit more vivid than you and I really have. I don't really hear my father talk to me, but I think yes. I think in a sense that there is a part of me that is my father that speaks to me. He just doesn't speak in my father's voice, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think the idea is you have the voices in your head of the people that you love in this story, because it seems like all of the voices, sometimes he has the Man in Black in his head. I don't think he loves the Man in Black, but I think most of the voices that Roland has ever had in his head have been the people that he loved.
Yeah, and I would say the moments in which he has the Man in Black in his head are early in the story when he's still like learning how to love again.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like that.
All right, Matt, the end of the chapter here is, will he help me see Oy into the ground, Patrick? Patrick was willing, and the burial didn't take long. The body was far smaller than the heart it had held. That's
God.
like the greatest, saddest, most wonderful line in the history of this entire fucking language.
I think that I didn't actually tear up until that line. And I think I immediately like texted you and I was like, dear God.
Yeah, because you read this on Wednesday. Normally you wait until after the episode is out to read the next part. And then suddenly Wednesday morning, I'm getting a text from you and I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
He's there already.
I mean, we're so close to the end. I just couldn't wait. I try to pace it out just because it's like, if I read it immediately, then there's, I got nothing to do all week. Sure. But no, we're too close to the end. Too close to the end. Can't wait.
It's such a wonderful line and a great way to leave this chapter as we say goodbye to the last of Roland's quartet. He's all alone now. Well, he has Patrick, but really Patrick is like, he's here, but it's not like, it doesn't feel like, oh good, at least Roland has Patrick still, because he's so new. He's just not, we don't have a lot of emotional attachment to Patrick.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, not to be kind of cold about it, but it makes it difficult to have emotional attachment to him when he can't speak.
Sure.
I mean, we did manage to have emotional attachment to Oy, but Oy could actually speak. It's just not very well. So
yeah. All right. Well, that is it for the reading this week. Next week, it's the end. Uh-huh. We're finishing the book next week and the series. Holy shit.
That's weird.
It is weird.
It doesn't feel real.
It doesn't. It does not feel real. And now, Matt, I should have thought about this before I asked the discussion question last week, but now for the most awkward transition in history, let's talk about jokes.
Yay, humor. You know what? This will be a pick-me-up. This is a good idea, actually, because we don't want to end on, and then aren't you glad you listened to Kingslingers, the podcast where two men cry.
Oh, God. It's really hard to stop yourself from crying while talking, folks. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it's really difficult.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about some jokes. Our discussion question from last week is, what is the best joke Stephen King has ever written?
Ald84001 says, Irene, okay, I guess this is text.
This is a quote
from a book, yeah. Irene forgot to depress the clutch when she keyed the ignition. The IH lurched forward, then stalled. Oy scrabbled for balance on Jake's lap and sprayed out a mouthful of turkey, along with a word he had learned from Eddie. Irene stared at the bumbler with wide, startled eyes. Did that creature just say, fuck, young man? And then the poster goes on to say, the fact that Eddie taught Oy swears and it happened off the page, only to be revealed in a moment of crucial tension, is one of the funniest fucking things I've ever heard. Take a second, close your eyes, and imagine this scene. Somewhere along the trail to the Dark Tower, a roaring campfire and bellies full of venison have coaxed the others into an early slumber. On a log sits Eddie, scraps of meat in his hand. Fuck, he says. What? Oy barks, sitting at Eddie's feet like a very picture of an obedient dog. Fuck, Eddie corrects. Fuck, Oy repeats confidently. Jake's gonna bust a goddamn kidney, Eddie murmurs to himself as he tosses Oy a piece of gunslinger jerky.
It's too fucking soon, man.
No, this is great though. Now I have to go write a bunch of Dark Tower fan fiction where everybody's just happy.
Mm-hmm.
I see why people write fan fiction now. It's so that you can take all the sadness and push it far, far away, far, far, far away.
All right. Next we have Pear Jane, who picks apart from the girl who loved Tom Gordon. This is about the main character of that story. At some point, when she's lost in the woods, she drinks water from a creek and then is seized with cramps for a few hours because some organism in the water did not agree with her bowels. She drops trow, gets dizzy, and ends up falling backwards into her own hot mess, as he put it. It's a painful, real, and weirdly funny scene for any of us who have been seized with diarrhea while on a camping trip. 20 or so pages later, we have this passage. Life could be very sad, it seemed to her, and mostly it was what it could be. People made believe that it wasn't, and they lied to their kids. No movie or television program she had ever seen had prepared her for losing her balance and plopping back into her own crap, for instance, so as not to scare them or bum them out. But yeah, it could be sad. I've only read this book once, but that parenthetical has stuck with me for 20 years. It's fun and wry. It's funny and wry, and exactly the kind of Stephen King observation that made his books such a joy to read. I think Eddie especially would have enjoyed that observation. Yeah.
It's wisdom wrapped with humor. Yeah. I'm Your Destiny says, I wish I could provide exact details or quotes, but I can't remember this joke from the Tommyknockers exactly as it was written. I read it about 5 years ago, and this line has stood out ever since, but faded with time. The setup is the townspeople of Haven, Maine, soon find themselves highly motivated and intelligent in terms of tinkering with everyday objects to make life easier. For example, a mail lady creates a mail sorting machine from scratch, and a writer creates a machine that reads her mind and writes out the words without a keyboard. Despite these advances, the townspeople are still occasionally clumsy and human. One of the other townspeople is tinkering with something volatile, like fire, explosives, batteries, etc., and after a small blast, the man looks at the freshly created stub of his wrist. Stephen King then breaks the fourth wall and says something to the effect of, "Let's give him a hand, folks." Oh, God.
Oh, Stephen.
That's the just totally black humor that is why we come here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Next we have S. Robinson 62, who says, I really struggled with this. I was digging around through my library when all of a sudden it hit me. Bing! Anyway, for this question, I'll use one of Cy King's recent tweets. Did you hear about the explosion at the cheese factory? There was nothing left but debris. So for those that don't know, for those of our listeners who do not use Twitter, Stephen King will just sometimes tweet terrible fucking jokes out on his Twitter. Just the worst fucking amazing jokes, and they become good because they're so bad, and it's really great, Matt. It's really great.
Okay, yes. See, I don't follow him specifically because I don't want him to just tweet like, so here's some thoughts on the ending of the Dark Tower.
I don't think he's gonna do that.
Well, anyway, starting basically tomorrow, as soon as I read the rest of this book, I'm going to follow him. So,
and maybe he'll follow you back.
Oh, yeah, probably.
He won't.
No.
He won't.
Okay.
He only follows 130 people, Matt. I'm sorry.
Well,
and they're mostly politicians.
Well, now I know what I have to do.
No, don't do it, Matt.
All right. Emperor Fry the Solid says, my favorite King joke is from his Twitter. It's a meme and so topical, it won't make sense in a year, but goddamn it, I laugh cried. Scott, I don't know, figure out a way to make this work in podcast form.
All right, so just explain it in detail.
Okay.
I've screenshotted a picture here for you.
All right, so we have Pennywise the clown looking out from underneath the storm grate. Tim Curry version,
yes.
Smiling, and the caption is, "I have 11,780 votes."
And this was tweeted right after the Trump phone call with the Georgia Secretary of State, where he was just saying, find me votes.
Okay.
And so Pennywise has them.
You
just have to they just have to come down in the sewer because all those votes float down there.
Yeah.
It's very good. It is very specific. No one's going to understand that in the future, but it's really good.
It's great.
Dark Gazing says his favorite is, have you got Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, then you better let him out. Wah, wah, wah. Technically not one of his, but I'm going to go with it because it's iconic. That's from It, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let that go right by me. Anyway, Shortstop 88 says, probably not my favorite King joke, but definitely the one that popped in my head. No need for spoiler avoidance. It appeared earlier in the story. Let's cast off back to Calibrin Sturgis, where our hero, Roland Deschain, asks Per Callahan, would she know enough to turn the baby out before it's time? On its own, this seems like a perfect setup for a joke. A priest and a gunslinger walk into a bar. The gunslinger asks if the priest knows any good abortion doctors. However, it becomes even funnier due to the difference between the difference of the worlds each comes from. Roland thinks nothing of the question he asks and starts mulling over his thoughts on the particulars, and a third of the page later cuts off his own train of thought when he sees Callahan is furious. When the priest tells him no, and Roland asks why, it's finally time for the payoff that might have the reader actually laugh aloud. Callahan gives his explanation. Because I'm a Catholic. I don't understand, is what Roland says.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, no, it is funny because the joke is completely lost on the characters, but it's a kind of absurdity that strikes us as the reader because we know what's going on.
Hey, remember 2 books ago when we were like happy and loved our characters and they weren't going to die and everything was good?
No, I mean, see, this is what I think I already get why people reread the books, because you have to wash the sadness away.
Yeah, you can see Oy again. Just read The Wastelands.
I know.
It's easy.
I know.
Rob the Gob says, Scott stole my answer by telling us we couldn't be cheeky and saying one of King's books. As you'll see in a couple minutes here, Rob. People did not listen to me. So I'll go with something that wasn't necessarily a joke, but I'm sure was intended to get a laugh out of the reader. It's been brought up a couple times in the podcast, but the line in The Drawing of the Three where the pilot thinks to himself that nobody ever taught Eddie the trick of leaning forward while sitting on the toilet. I'm currently reading Drawing, and when the part came up, it got a hearty laugh out of me, as it has on my previous reads. Also, the Tommyknockers is King's best joke. Sorry, Scott, I couldn't help myself, but I'm sure you understand why I had to. I can't cry pardon and say thank you.
It's still so funny.
They couldn't lean forward.
The visual, because it's such a good visual joke that he's just sitting on the toilet, clearly could reach it if he just leaned forward slightly, but he's like, oh, I couldn't reach.
It's an airplane bathroom, which is objectively the smallest room in the history of rooms. And he's just like, I couldn't reach the door.
Yeah. Sitting up perfectly straight, which I think no one does when they're taking a shit anyway. No. Oh my God. It's always going to be the funniest thing that ever happened.
I miss you, Eddie. I miss you so much.
I know. Nick Grew says, Stephen King always gets me laughing out loud and earning side glances from my wife with his toilet humor descriptions. Not quite jokes, but still funny. A couple of classic examples. Fat Johnny reached down, and as he grasps the wallet, he farted loudly and screamed. With faint amusement, the gunslinger realized he had mistaken the sound of his own fart for a gunshot, and his time of dying had come. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Get ahead of myself. Okay, and then the next one. There's a sudden spreading pancake of warmth on his ass, and he realized that he had just shot the chocolate.
So here's the thing that Stephen King realizes. Poop is funny.
It is.
Farts are funny.
They are.
And anything with pooping and farting is really funny. As our next answer will see, also throwing up, really funny. Because Jeremy says, I'll have to go with Gordy's story in the body. The Pukorama, a.k.a. The Revenge of Lardass. The story just puts you in the mindset of a preteen kid hanging with his crew, yucking it up. Always reminds me of my 80s childhood in northeastern Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Yep.
You know what that is, Matt, since you've seen that movie.
I have. I mean, bodily functions are very funny, and King is not wrong.
They are extremely funny.
Next answer from Christian R. The answer is the Tommyknockers. That's the joke.
You didn't, Christian. I said no. Don't do that. Alavoy says the Zen Buddhist joke lives in my head rent free. I always imagined it as a clip on YouTube with 5.4 million views.
Steve B says, this is a tough one. I never really thought of Cy King as a purveyor of humor. I don't use Twitter, so I'm left with only his books that I've read as a source of material for this question. I think I'll have to go with the intro to Jake's essay as my favorite King joke. I don't know why, but the reference to T.S. Eliot and Robert Browning as Butch in Sundance always tickled me more than it should. I can think of nobody less likely to engage in a career of violent crime than Eliot, robbing your bank, not with a bang, but a whimper. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, Steve actually in his email went on to talk briefly about how kind of like you see J.R.R. Tolkien in this story everywhere. He sees T.S. Eliot, and he gave us some quotes from a poem called Ash Wednesday in relation to last week's discussion, in which Ash Wednesday was referenced. And there's a stanza of that poem that talks specifically about a rose and just seems very Dark Tower-y. So that's some interesting stuff. I love that kind of stuff because, obviously we've been very Tolkien lensed because both you and I love those stories, but I think there's a lot going on here. And I do wonder we know King loves T.S. Eliot because the Wastelands, but right. I wonder if a lot of this is there's allusions here everywhere to a bunch of different things he loves.
I'm sure there are. I would love to find out about the ones that we're not aware of yet.
Yeah, sure. So keep sending them in, Steve, and anyone else that has them. Yeah. Love it. Bent Westward says, having been a Stephen King fan starting in the 80s, my favorite recurring Stephen King joke, written or not, are his film adaptation cameos. From the country bumpkin dealing with a meteor shit killer space weeds and creep show, to the unfortunate recipient of ATM profanity in Maximum Overdrive, to the somber priest in Pet Sematary. They become a bit more sporadic in the 90s and 2000s as film adaptations became looser and looser, with low-budget horror fare paying more for the story name rather than on actors, a director, and a script, or all of the above. The most memorable cameo in recent memory is his appearance in It Chapter 2 as the pawn shop dealer who talks about hating a character's writing because he did not like the ending. A clear self-deprecating nod to pop culture motif about his own endings being inconsistent at times. A sentiment I wholeheartedly disagree with. Me too.
That's fun. What's weird is I feel like I have watched a pretty good cross-section of Stephen King films, and I do not remember any Stephen King cameos in any of them.
Well, we'll have to fix that, won't we?
Yeah, I'm sure we will as we move on to our next projects. But cool.
I did really like his cameo in It Chapter 2. I agree with that, and I do agree that that's him winking at this idea that he sucks at endings. That I agree is total bullshit.
Yeah,
total bullshit.
I mean, a lot of my favorite authors have a reputation for writing bad endings, and I think people are just bad at reading. So take that.
Got him.
Yep. Daniel M, rather, says, I know damn well there are a ton of funny lines that aren't springing to the forefront of my mind. I bet we will hear from Richie in this week's answers. Beep, beep. I don't get it.
It's from It. One day, Matt. You'll get it one day.
I, however, am going to go with my favorite Eddie Dean quote that makes me laugh when I hear it, and I failed to get into you lot in time for the Eddie Dean memorial service. Roll me in sugar and call me a fucking jelly donut. That's great.
I miss Eddie so much.
I know. We're just going to have to read through the whole story again and do this podcast again. Just
forever.
As soon as we finish. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Steve D says, I think it's funny how he always refers to his dog as Molly, aka the Thing of Evil, on Twitter. Not that it's particularly funny, but he insists she's a thing of evil. I'm not convinced this is so based on his tweets. He may be projecting inherent evil on an innocent creature. He may be projecting inherent evil on everything and reaping the benefits.
I mean, not that I know his dog, but I kind of imagine there being an intrinsic absurdist humor to like looking at this dog, which is just an innocent dog, which is just looking at you with its eyes of pure purity and innocence, and being like it's evil. It's an evil dog.
I've just shown you a picture in the script of Molly, aka the Thing of
that's
Evil.
Exactly what I was imagining, is like the most perfect and beautiful, cute dog and imagining this as a creature of evil is hilarious, like just intrinsically. So,
and you'll notice Molly is sitting in her custom bed that has stitched on the bed, Molly, aka the Thing of Evil.
Yeah,
it's hilarious.
It's great. He's so funny. He really is. All right, final answer from Eric T. It is probably Jack Torrance interacting with the ex-bartender in The Overlook. Things like, "I've always liked you, Lloyd," even after not ever meeting him, was funny, but in a manic nutso way, and I laughed along. But mostly, I didn't want the crazy guy to think I didn't think it was funny, which ended up being funny since the crazy guy was in a book and not real. It was a legitimate, lighthearted comment that added more to the scene than any other joke, funny or otherwise, has added, at least that I can think of. Yeah, I like that.
And God, Jack Nicholson did such a good job with that kind of weird, uncomfortable humor in that movie.
Yeah, right. Like, I know I've heard that the adaptation is not a very faithful one, but I'm pretty sure I recognize that from the movie, and yeah, him sort of trying to be like that. We're pals, aren't we, Lloyd? But actually, it's more like, we're co-enabling our own worst tendencies, aren't we, Lloyd?
Yeah. All right, that is it for this week's discussion question. Now we got to move on to next week's, Matt. So we lost 2 characters this week. So normally we would have done like a memorial question, but we lost 2 of them. One just left, and the other, well, got impaled on a tree. So we're going to give you folks an option here. If I want to give Susannah / Odetta / Detta their moment. So I want you to tell me what your favorite Susannah, Odetta, Detta moment in the Dark Tower is. But I also want you, if you really want to talk about sweet boy Oy, the good boy, I want to give you that option as well. So I think the primary question is going to be, talk about Susannah. What is your favorite Susannah moment in this series? But also maybe give us a little bonus. What about Oy boy? What's your favorite moment?
Yeah, I'm excited about this one because I feel like because Susannah was sort of not the focus for so much of the story, I feel like I've only really turned my full attention onto her recently, and so I would appreciate people's thoughts, insights, memories, best moments, stuff like that, to kind of give us a reason to think about her more before we wrap all this up.
I will say having a clearer understanding of who she is by the time you reach the end of this book, I think allows you to appreciate her in the earlier books on a much deeper level. I noticed that a lot this time around, and I didn't want to dive too much into it because I didn't want to spoil all this deep information we learn about her later. But I do think it's one of those things that a reread absolutely rewards. Yeah,
well, that's always the challenge of doing this kind of show is that you're like, if I give, if I disrespect some character where you're like, "Oh, Matt, you're gonna come to love that character, but I can't tell you that right now." So
yeah, you fucking asshole.
Exactly.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. As we said, next week, it's the end. We're going to finish the book. We're 45 pages from the end. So we're going to finish the book next week. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of an asshole for making me wait a whole week to read the end of the book. So there you go. Now we're even.
Fine.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach out to us at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter @kingslingerspod. And of course, as we talked about at the top of the episode, the subreddit r/doofmedia is a place where people can go discuss the discussion question answers, or just talk about the book in general, or check out some of the other stuff that we're doing on the Doof Media Podcast Network.
We're doing so many things, and we want to make sure that you catch all of them. If you like this show, you're probably going to like those, I would think.
Yeah.
And of course, if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, this is the moment to do it, the moment right before the end. We really recommend you do so. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and starting this week, because I just learned we could do this, we're now on Audible as well. So that while you're listening to your audiobooks, you can listen to us because we're on there.
Yeah, we're just invading your ears from every angle.
Yeah,
all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
You can't escape us.
Yep. And if you like any of the other shows on our network, then please support them. You can donate to us via Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. Speaking of which, this week we have one new person pledging at the Doof Dancer level, Colin K, and 2 new Doof Troopers, Sunil S and Linor. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And we hope you appreciate the neat stuff that we make available with those different reward tiers. We have a whole bunch of bonus podcasts and such.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff.
Yeah, including the other levels of the tower where Scott and I watch Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah, that should be coming up pretty soon, I think. Not this week, but next. We'll be talking about Misery, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. If you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can, of course, help us out by sharing this podcast with all your Stephen King buddies, all the constant readers out there. Make them constant listeners. You can do it. You can also, of course, help us out by leaving us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight Review comes from Darth Vaden, who gives us 5 stars and says, top tier podcasting. As both a constant reader and an English teacher, I've taken great delight in revisiting the worlds of Roland through these podcasts. Suggested to me by my cousin, also a constant reader. Hey, there's one that was doing just what I told him to. Thanks. These beautiful close readings give me such a thrill, and getting to hear 2 folks discuss the nuance of language and kids' work just gives me good mind. Keep up the impeccable work. Ooh, I like that word, impeccable.
Oh, that feels good. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Darth Vaden. And thank you everyone who has taken the time to leave those ratings and reviews. As we always say, they really sincerely help, and we appreciate you taking the time to do it. Plus, they just make me feel good. Especially today when I'm sad because my good boy died.
Yeah, we need extra reviews this week because we're sad.
Yeah. All right, folks. We'll see you right back here next week for the end. This is it. We're doing it next week. Let's finish the series. Long days and pleasant nights.
And that you have twice the number.